Good evening. This is I lost count already. Number Shir in Meshekh Cokhmah. We're going to have a little discussion of the Meshekh Cokhmah on Bereshis Perek Chav Hey Pasuk Chav Gimel. That's 25-23. But before we get to the actual Meshekh Cokhmah, I want to look at the whole role that Eisav plays in the story of the Jewish people. So the Torah, later in the parsha, describes Yitzchak's attraction to Eisav. He says he loved Eisav ki tzayid befiv, because Eisav was a hunter. He used to hunt animals, and he would bring the animals to Yitzchak for Yitzchak to enjoy. So Yitzchak would, the Medrash, though, quoted by Rashi, says Kitzayid Befiv, that he would use his mouth to ensnare. He hunted with his mouth. So Eisav would impress his father with shows of religiosity. And the Medrash says, for example, asking the correct way to give meiser on salt, even though he knew full well that there is no meiser on salt. Sforno understands the pasuk a little less obviously, that when it says that Yitzchak loved Eisav, it doesn't mean Rivqa loved Yaakov and Yitzchak only loved Eisav, but rather that, in the Sforno's wording, Yitzchak also loved Eisav, even though he knew he was not as whole, as tam, as Yaakov. So Yitzchak had this dream for his sons. He dreamed that they'd live together in a partnership. Yaakov would study Torah. Eisav would provide the means that Yaakov would be able to do so. Eisav did commit to the land, right? The pasuk says he was an ish sadeh, but he did it in a way that didn't take advantage of his abilities. So Yitzchak had this dream that Eisav, his son, would grow up to be a prosperous individual who could support the religious side of this union, and instead he becomes an ish sadeh, a person who's defined by the field. Instead of learning derech eretz, the way of the land, he becomes an ish sadeh. The land teaches him how to act, and therefore, even Torah, when it came to Torah, instead of just an actual concern for what Meiser was about, in the example the Medrash gives, he uses it to get what he wants out of his father. So it's a flipping of purpose and the means, right? He was supposed to be the person who took the worldliness and applied it to the purposes of Torah, and instead he took Torah and used it to get what he wanted out of this world. So there's an idea that the Rav, that Rav Yishmael would say. I've heard it a number of times from speakers on the Gush's podcast, Shivat Haratzion's podcast, that this idea that Eisav was supposed to be the physical arm and Yaakov would be the Torah study arm. So Eisav's children would have then been supporting and protecting Yaakov's. What a difference would be from the last 2,000 years, which are called Galus Edom, the Galus of Eisav's legacy, we'll call it. Truth is, the reason why we call it Galus Edom has very little to do genetically with Eisav. The Eisav's descendants settled Har Seir. They were evicted from Har Seir by another nation, and that nation ended up being called Edomian, out of the fact that they lived in the land that Eisav progeny named Edom. The Edomians become part of the Roman Empire, most famously Herod, Hordus, and Antipater, who were Edomian, and therefore the Chazal have come to associate the Roman Empire because they had appointed an Edomian governor for us. They associated them with Edom, but the truth is that not from a genetic point of view, but from a conceptual point of view, Rome really was the legacy of Eisav, because Rome were the people who really mastered the art of settling the world and mastering physical power. And it's interesting that Edom then ends up, the Romans then end up being the backbone of the Catholic Church, so that they have a shadow. They took a lesson from us, if not the complete lesson, on the religious front. So, according to the Kedushas Levi's version of this whole idea, Yitzchak knew that Eisav had shortcomings. He felt, though, that a person was supposed to go out into the real world. And this is something Yitzchak himself didn't really do that much, right? The only thing we know that he did in the real world was copy exactly what his father did. He redug the wells his father dug. He didn't really have a worldliness. And therefore, when he saw Eisav, he thought that this is what happens to a tzaddik who goes out into the real world. As Shlomo Melech puts it in Mishlei, Ki sheva yipol tzaddik v'kam. A tzaddik falls 7 times and gets up. And he figured that what he saw in Eisav was just a tzaddik who was falling. But it goes even further than this. This hypothetical ideal world where Eisav and Yaakov would have come together to form a single nation. Because we have the Einei Leah Rakos. Leah's eyes were weak, or puffy, sometimes it's translated, but Rakos really means weak. And Chazal tell us it was from crying, and this is a well-known medrash because it's in Rashi, that she was taunted because she, the older daughter, was supposed to marry Eisav, Yitzchak's firstborn, and then Rachel would marry Yaakov. So in the ideal world, though, that would have worked very well, because then Yehuda, the kingship, would have come from Eisav, the son that Yitzchak had thought had the potential to be the material leader of the group. Whether Leah would have still ended up delivering Levi is a little less obvious. But this relationship that we always talk about, well, Kolnikim always talk about, the Yisachar-Zvulun relationship, where Yisachar smach Zvulun b'tzeisecha, Zvulun should be happy when they go out doing their international trade, because Zvulun had the coastline and the ships. The Yisachar bo'alecha, and Yisachar in its tents, and this is understood to mean Zvulun made all that money in international trade, would support their brother Yisachar, who would be bo'alecha, sitting and learning. Yisachar, though, was originally supposed to be born to Rachel, to the daughter who was supposed to marry Yaakov. However, because of the whole story with Reuven and Dudaim, and why was the whole story with Reuven and Dudaim? Because Leah wasn't the preferred wife, because she was really slated to go to Eisav, so therefore there was a natural attraction to Rachel, and all that ended up making it that Yisachar, that jealousy was why Reuven stole the Dudaim, the flowers, and that was the night that Yisachar was conceived. So Yisachar, in a sense, is a child who actually did move, like I was wondering about Levi, did move from being on one side of the family, from the Leah side of the family from the Rachel side of the family to the Leah side of the family. So in this hypothetical ideal world, it would have been that Zvulun would have been from Leah, supporting Yisachar from Rachel. Instead, they both come from Leah because Leah ends up marrying Yaakov. So with this background, the starting with the Seforno and the Beis Halevi, I will now want to get to the Meshekh Cokhmah. So the Meshekh Cokhmah says, Shnei goyim bevitnech. The prophet and again, Medrash says the prophet is Shem, and kind of would have to be either Shem or Aver. There aren't too many other candidates. Tells Rivqah, Shnei goyim bevitnech. There are two nations in your belly. And the Gemara in Avodah Zarah says, and Meshekh quotes it, Za Antoninus Virebi. This is represented by two great people of the period of the Mishnayos. Antoninos, one of the Anthonys, we're not sure. I mean, the Gemara actually says he was Caesar. Historians aren't clear if it was a Caesar, if it was a second to the Caesar, if it was a regional leader, exactly who Antoninus was. But these were two incredibly wealthy, powerful men, one coming from Rome and therefore Edom, and the other from Rebbe coming from Bnei Yisrael, from Yaakov. Ha'inyan. So what was bothering her that there were these two warring children in her belly? Why was this problematic? I mean, if she would have known there were two children, that would be enough to know that, well, one was, as Rashi famously says, one was running to the place of Avodah Zarah, and the other one was running to the places of Torah, the holy places. So the question is, why was that not enough of the question the Meshekh Cokhmah is implicitly going to answer is, why was that not enough of an explanation? Ha'inyan de Sarah bira chelak hatov. Sarah clarified, was associated only with the good side. V'chelak hara, and the bad side of Avram's legacy, the negative side of Avram's legacy, Nutla Hagar, was taken by Hagar. Kamosha Amru, as it says, Ad Yaakov Avinu lo paska zuama. Until Yaakov Avinu, the negative elements, the spiritually negative, I guess I'm going to have to reuse the word because I can't think of anything else, element did not end. So Avram had to give birth to, father, he didn't give birth, he's a man, had to father Yitzchaq and Yishmael, and then Yitzchaq had to father Eisav and Yaakov. But when it came to Yitzchaq and Yishmael, each had a separate mother. And what Rivqa didn't understand is, how was she one person that was actually carrying both a good child and a child that would not carry on the legacy of Avraham, of building the Jewish people. Kivan Sharasa, since she saw Shabanim misrotzitzim, that the boys are moving around, when she went to a place of idolatry, Asu Eisav mefarches lotes, Eisav would push to get out. Harekana echad tova echad ra. So she knew that one was good and one was bad. Why is my fate different than that of Sarah? Rivqa nitan games hatov, games hara. That she would carry both the good and the bad, and she thought that this was a judgment about herself. That she was not a Sarah who would only carry on the child that would carry on the legacy to build the Jewish people. Below Birula Hatov La'atzmo. She wasn't given just the Tov by itself. Ve'shivula, so this Navi replies to her, Shnei Goyim, there are two nations, Antoninus, Hare Shebechelak Harash, Shnei Goyim Antoninus, meaning the two nations, one of them will produce an Anthony. Hare Shebechelak Harashalach, in your evil element, in the child that is less positive, the Eisav, in him, Urbav Gam hatov. There's mixed in an element of good. V'lachein hema shneim bevitneich, and therefore they're both together in your stomach, v'dok. And you should analyze this and it will become clear. So, how is Eisav different than Yishmael? Yishmael was entirely carried traits that Hashem didn't want to build a Jewish nation upon. With Eisav, it was a matter of he needed to bring something in the world that eventually, through his children, through the Edomians, through the Romans, produces an Antoninus who was a friend and a helper of Rebbe and supported the study of Torah. So there is a positive element to Eisav that still is and could and will, at the end of time, at the end of this Golos, be put together. So what happened, though, was Rivqa never shares this Nevuah with Yaakov. So Yaakov never hears that these two nations would be separate, right? He just saw that he had two sons. One was good, one had an element of good that needed further development, and he thought that history would play out without this yiparedu, without perud, without separation, and it would be one nation. And the side that needs developing is the side that would end up being the secular authority and the source of prosperity. If you think about it too, Yehuda, who ends up being the Malchus, also is constantly doing tshuva, right? He does tshuva. He admits his mistake with Tamar. He is the one who approaches Yosef and admits their mistake in trying to kill him and then trying to sell him. Well, selling him. David HaMelech apologizes, does tshuva for how he obtained Bathsheba by sending her husband off to the front. So there is an element, there is a real reason that Yaakov would have to believe that the side of tzidkus that involves itself in the real world and elevates the real world would be this fall 7 times and rises kind of figure. So it could have been that in this hypothetical world, Leah would have married Eisav and had produced, what's it called? But Eisav actually ends up getting a second chance because Eisav does tshuva, and Yaakov does not know this. And when Eisav comes when they cross paths again in next week's Parsha, Yaakov is held accountable because everybody is, I'm skipping forward. When the two encounter, everybody is listed except Dinah is not mentioned. And Medrash Rabbah says that Dinah was not mentioned because Yaakov hid her in a trunk because he didn't want Eisav to meet her. The thing is, though, had Eisav met Dinah, he would have had a second chance to tie in with Leah, Dinah being Leah's daughter. And who knows if we would have been, if history would have been ready for that then, if we would have been spared the last 2,000 years of Golos, because we could have had Eisav working together with us all this time, as opposed to Edom being developed through Rome, through Christianity, and through the past 2,000 years. So what's interesting about this, and struck me, and it may be a little controversial, so you don't have to agree, I'm wondering if there's an actual messianic element to Vatican II. If this notion that the church is willing to no longer consider us a bunch of Christ killers, or at least the Catholic churches, and that at this point they even are willing to admit that there's a path to heaven through Judaism. Perhaps we're seeing maybe the first steps of this eventual reunion of Yaakov and our brother Eisav. But it's an interesting thing to think about also the total interplay between religious and secular authority, and of course the challenges of being the kind of tzaddik who doesn't live in the ivory tower. And does it actually ever work to live in the ivory tower, or is there always something that climbs over the wall? I'll leave you with that as a thought piece. Um, and Adiel wrote something kind of interesting, so I want to share that before I go, because I was going to say goodbye. When I picked my head up to hit the end live video, I see this. So he asks, do we say that all the Shvatim are Bnei Rachel, since they all really would have been hers? After all, Rachel Mavakal Baneha is all the children of the Shvatim. I think the way I was developing the thought, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily more accurate than what you suggest in your question, was more, we were supposed to actually have the two mothers and two fathers, and Leah still mostly serves the role of being the father of the mother of Malchus, right? The Malchus based David, whereas we have fighting Amalek is the job of Binyamin, right? Because that ends up going to Shaul, and then we have Malchus base Yosef, who Meshekh base Yosef is killed actually by the final war with Amalek, killed in the final war with Amalek, at least one Gemara, and so this. Why was I discussing this? Yeah, and interestingly enough, where does Amalek come from? So this fight with Eisav with Amalek is actually false to Rachel. So yes. So I was thinking that they're actually both all our mother. Leah being our mother in the one we would pray for our physical needs, and maybe Rachel Mavakal Baneha Kienenu is discussing about the spiritual devastation more than the physical devastation. I don't really know, because I didn't really think of bringing that pasuk in until I saw your message. It's definitely something to think about. But that's the where I was going with this. But also right. Also fighting Amalek until the end of time is also an issue of there would have been no Amalek if Eisav would have been part of Klal Yisrael. But again, that was an ideal world, and it was known from before he was born that this was not actually going to happen. Yitzchaq, being more of an idealist, being a carbon and sitting on the Akedah, perhaps did not realize how far the world was from the ideal. And it's how many thousands of years later? 4,000 years later, and we're still working toward that ideal. So, B'meher B'meinu, have a great Shabbos, and speak to you next week. Be'ezras Hashem. Bye.